Welcome back to Legal Matters Now. The appeal court has adjourned hearing on the suit filed by the governorship candidate of the People's Democratic Party in the 2018 governorship election in Osun State, Senator Ademola Adeleke. Senator Adeleke is asking the court to set aside the verdict of the lower court, which ruled that he did not qualify for the governorship election because the secondary school certificate he submitted to INEC was allegedly forged. A trial judge adjourned the hearing to enable the court to hear Senator Adeleke's appeal alongside another appeal filed by the PDP, which is not ripe for hearing. The presiding judge of the three-man panel of Justice, Abubakar Dati Yahaya, held that since the appeals are similar in fact, the court cannot hear them piecemeal. He therefore fixed May 8th for definite hearing.
It was brought to the attention of the court that PDP has a similar appeal, so the court wants to avoid giving conflicting judgments and taking them in piecemeal. So both the PDP appeal and this present appeal will be heard on the 8th of May. It's not a consolidated appeal, but they are separate, but they will be heard on the 8th of May. Again, Nigerians should be patient. The legal process and the judicial process goes on its own trajectory, but victory and justice are the ends, and we will get there. One party does not argue an appeal. The court has to be ready. The parties have to be ready so that nobody can be said to have been shut out.
South Africa's police watchdog, the Independent Police Investigative Directorate, is looking into the death of 28-year-old Victor Ude, a Nigerian national, in police holding cells in Cape Town on May Day. In a statement, the IPID national spokesperson, Moses Lamini, says Mr. Ude had been arrested following an alleged domestic dispute between him and his ex-girlfriend. The police told IPID that the lady accused her ex-boyfriend of drug dealing and that he grabbed something that was wrapped in plastic and swallowed it. Upon being questioned, it is alleged that Mr. Ude became unruly and swore at the police, after which he was arrested for riotous behavior. He was detained at the police station in the Luando area of Cape Town, where he was later found hanging by his sweater at the holding cells just after midday. According to Mr. Lamini, an inquest docket has been opened and the matter is being investigated.
Began today with a statement from IPID, which is the Independent Police Investigative Directorate, which investigates the conduct of the police in South Africa. They released a statement on the death of a 28-year-old Nigerian, Mr. Ude, who allegedly was in a domestic violent situation with an ex-girlfriend, and then he was arrested. A few hours later, he was found hanging. And the police claim, according to the version that they gave to IPID, the police claim that he committed suicide. The leader of the Nigerian community in the Western Cape, Mr. Obinna Obiora, has had the opportunity to view the body. So the allegations that he may have swallowed something wrapped in plastic wrapping, which is part of some of the stories given when most of those extrajudicial killings have happened in the past. So the Nigerian community in Western Cape is not buying that. According to Mr. Obiora, they're calling for an independent investigator along with the government investigators to look into the post-mortem and also the things that, or the events that led to what may have happened. And we have also spoken to the Consul General of Nigeria on this incident. He's quite outraged, and they're doing everything they can, according to him, to work with the authorities to find out what exactly happened to the 28-year-old Nigerian man.
Our South Africa Bureau Chief reporting from Johannesburg. Time for business news now. Here's Melinda Akilami.
You first. First Bank.
Many thanks, Amarachi. Welcome to Business News. Nigerian authorities have been asked to focus on a two-pronged economic approach to infrastructure, policies and energy provision, as well as better public service in order to achieve higher economic inclusion. The advice is part of a one-on-one interview about the state of Africa's regional economic outlook held by Channels Television with the Africa Director of the International Monetary Fund, Mr. Abebe Selassie, in Abuja.
First, of course, is that you need diversification in this economy. So, looking at the policies that are required to facilitate more private investment, I think is important. The kind of policies, of course, for example, I think, you cannot really have any diversification, any activities that require more higher level technology without electricity. So making sure that you have adequate energy supply, reforms that will facilitate that, I think is really, really paramount. So one big challenge, policy challenge we see is doing the reforms that will facilitate diversification and allow, more agricultural production, agriculture to move up the value chain. I think that's one set of reforms that are needed.
The Central Bank of Nigeria has provided further clarifications for commercial banks and individuals that violate the new policy guidelines on clean and fit Naira notes. On Channel's Business Morning program today, the CBN Director of Banking Operations, Mrs. Priscilla Eleje, explains the action plan.
We have a mechanism now to track every single banknote that we've put out into circulation. We do that by capturing the serial numbers. What we're doing now is to totally automate that process so that we're able to track it to the bank and then we can take appropriate decisions. We do have sting operations, and during the sting operations, those who are caught selling the money, they're handed over to security agencies. We are also working at expeditious, that is having the court proceedings to be more expeditious than they are now, so that those who are caught selling, judgment can be taken quickly, and then it can serve as a deterrent to those involved in that very ugly operation activity.
The first trading day of May begins with a positive but weak start as the market tries to recover from heavy losses recorded within the month of April. Edidiong has the numbers.
Hello and welcome to the Stock Market Report. Nigerian equities were looking for direction on the first trading day of the new month, with the all-share index managing 0.04% in the positive territory. However, the headline index and total equity remained sluggish at 29,000 and 10 trillion naira levels. The volume and value of shares traded today were significantly lower compared with the last trading session in April, standing at 279.61 million shares, valued at 2.82 billion naira, and were exchanged in over 4,000 deals. 4 out of the major sectors closed on the upside, except banking, which was down 0.52%. Now, looking at the table, the industrial goods counter gained the most and was up 0.45%, while consumer goods was next 0.39%. Shares of Transcorp, Dangote Flour and Champs PLC were the most actively traded for the day. But that's a roundup of the stock trading at the Nigerian equities market. I'm Edidiong Iwang.
On the other hand, U.S. markets fell for a second consecutive day in the new month over an hour ago as investors continue to react to disappointing comments from the Federal Reserve's chair, Mr. Jerome Powell, over interest rate cuts. Let's find out how other major global markets ended today. That's Business News Tonight. It's back to you, Amarachi.
You First. First Bank.
Thanks, Melinda. Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, has accused the country's Attorney General of lying to Congress. Ms. Pelosi's accusations stem from Mr. Barr saying he was not aware of any complaints Mr. Mueller had about the Attorney General's full-page summary of his report. Let's get a wrap-up of the international news now. Simon Pusey standing by in London.
Good evening from the Channel's newsroom here in London. 800,000 people have been evacuated from India's east coast as the country braces for Cyclone Fani. The severe weather system is heading towards the state of Odisha and is due to make landfall tomorrow. Currently a Category 3 storm, it's packing winds in excess of 200 kilometers an hour while tracking across the Bay of Bengal. Thousands of disaster management personnel have been deployed to help relocate those living in mud and thatch homes in low-lying areas to shelters.
Now we are first trying to evacuate the pregnant women and particularly the old people and people in thatched houses because they are more prone to danger. So we are just trying to lessen the human casualties.
Venezuela's opposition leader Juan Guaido is pushing ahead with his bid to topple embattled President Nicolas Maduro, calling for a series of escalating workers' strikes. More than 100 people were injured during demonstrations this week, and a woman was killed after being shot in the head in Caracas. Guaido says there will be acts of protest every day until liberty is achieved. There are calls for a criminal investigation after information was leaked about the UK's plan to allow Chinese telecoms giant Huawei to build the country's 5G network. The Defence Secretary, Gavin Williamson, was sacked by the Prime Minister after an inquiry found evidence to suggest he was responsible for disclosing discussions from the National Security Council. He strenuously denies any involvement.
I don't think we have ever seen a leak from the National Security Council, and that's why this is so serious. The damning letter from the Prime Minister was a result of her understanding that to leak from that committee is an abdication of responsibility and public duty.
Whether a criminal offence has been committed is a matter for independent prosecution authorities and ultimately for the courts.
Rescue teams are searching for missing people days after a devastating landslide in Bolivia. More than 60 homes were destroyed in La Paz as the fragile foundations gave way in a hilly suburban area. Family pets were rescued as crews searched the debris and recovered personal possessions. Emergency shelters have been set up for residents who've been left homeless. Julian Assange's prison conditions have been described as appalling. The WikiLeaks founder was jailed for 50 weeks by a court in London for skipping bail in 2012. An extradition hearing has now been held following a request from the United States. The case has been adjourned and a substantial hearing is scheduled for June the 12th.
For the last week since he was arrested, he has spent 23 out of 24 hours a day in his cell, most of the time. That is what we call, in general terms, solitary confinement. That's unacceptable. And that applies to most of the prisoners in that appalling facility.
A single-tone siren rang out across Israel to mark Holocaust Remembrance Day. The country came to a standstill for 2 minutes to honour the 6 million Jews who were killed by the Nazis during the Second World War. The Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, also attended a wreath-laying ceremony. In Poland, there was a huge gathering led by Holocaust survivors. People from around the world travelled to the former concentration camp Auschwitz to take part in a March of the Living. Thailand is coming to terms with a surprise announcement. The country now has a new queen. King Mahavarija Longkorn has married his bodyguard, Sutida Tijai, who was the deputy head of his personal security. The wedding comes ahead of this weekend's coronation ceremonies to consecrate his position. Firefighters came to the rescue after a 4-year-old girl accidentally fell into a deep well in East China. A rope made of bed sheets and a bucket allowed the girl to stay afloat until help arrived. The child was eventually reunited with her family and is said to be recovering well from her ordeal. And finally, an unlikely spy, a beluga whale, which was first spotted a few weeks ago with a harness strapped around its neck with the words "Equipment St. Petersburg," is still loitering off the coast of Norway. The mammal appears to be so comfortable with people that some have suggested it's a Russian spy in training. Its lack of desire to leave has triggered a public call to name it. Suggestions so far include White Russian, Agent James Beluga, and 00 Whale. And that's your international news around the world in 5.
So ahead of the news at 10, Samfra Primary School, Ebutameta and Dijul schools, Egbeda emerged biggest winners on the opening day of the Lagos preliminaries of the 2019 Channels International Kids Cup. We'll have more in sports news. Please stay with us.